Good day everyone, I am Diane Numern, and for today's report I will be discussing oral lore from pre-colonial period which focuses on epic. And in this report, we will learn about the meaning of epics, the different Philippine epics, their stories, and the important elements found in epic poetry. But before we proceed, let us first look at our learning objectives. At the end of this discussion, we should be able to identify the important characteristics and elements of pre-colonial epics, define oral lore, and explain the meaning of epics in pre-colonial Philippine literature, and appreciate the cultural values and traditions reflected in Philippine epics. So let us begin. First, let us answer the question, what is an epic? So an epic is a long narrative poem that tells about the deeds and adventures of a hero or a legendary figure. In simple words, an epic is a long story usually told in a poetic or artistic way about a brave or extraordinary hero. Epics often include adventures, battles, challenges, supernatural events, and important cultural beliefs. They are also usually connected to oral traditions. This means that before many of these stories were written down, they were passed from one generation to another through storytelling, chanting, or singing. So when we hear the word epic, we can remember three important ideas. It is long, it tells about heroic adventures, and it often comes from oral tradition. Now, let us talk about epics in the Philippines. The Philippines has a rich tradition of epic poetry. Different communities developed their own epic stories that reflected their history, beliefs, traditions, and way of life. According to the presentation, early historians such as Padre Colin, Joaquin Martinez de Zuniga, and Antonio Pigafetta attested to the existence of epics in the Philippines. This shows that epic storytelling has been an important part of Philippine culture for a long time. Some examples of Philippine epics include the Maragtas Chronicles of Panay, which is associated with Visayan epic poetry, Darangan from Mindanao, Aligoyan from the Igorot tradition, Biag ni Lamang from the Ilocano tradition, and Ibalon from Bicol epic poetry. Each of these epics has its own characters, events, and cultural background. Let us begin with the Maragtas Chronicles of Panay. This story attempts to explain the origins of Filipinos and tells about 10 datos or chieftains from Borneo. According to the presentation, these datos sailed across the oceans to escape the cruel rule of Sultan Makatunaw. And when they arrived on the islands of Panay, they encountered a native tribe called the Aitas. The Aitas eventually sold a piece of their land to the Datos, and they lived side by side in harmony. Next is Darangan, which comes from the Mindanao tradition. Darangan tells about the romantic adventures of noble warriors from Mindanao. One of the important warrior princes in the story is Bantugan. According to the presentation, Bantugan possesses a magical shield and is protected by divine spirits. This story revolves around war and love, and it is compared to Greek mythology and Homer's Trojan War because of its heroic and romantic elements. So what makes the Darangan especially interesting is that it is sung rather than simply read or spoken, and it consists of 25 chapters. The next epic is Aligoyan from the Igorot tradition. Aligoyan tells the story of a hero named Aligoyan who possesses great powers. Aligoyan can travel to far places without resting or eating, and he has never been defeated in battle. He eventually faces his rival Pumbakayon, who is the only warrior whose skills match his own. Their duel lasts for 3 years, but neither of them wins. Instead of continuing their conflict, Aliguyon decides to marry Pumbakayon's sister. Through this marriage, their tribes become united. Next, we have one of the most well-known Philippine folk epics, which is Biag ni Lamang from the Ilocano tradition. The epic focuses on the adventures, deeds, and life of Lamang, the main hero of the story. It is notable because it was the first Philippine folk epic to be recorded in written form and was one of only 2 folk epics documented during the Spanish colonial period. So this is important because it shows the transition from oral tradition to written literature. For a long time, stories such as epics were preserved by people through memory and oral performance. When they were eventually written down, they became easier to preserve and study. The last Philippine epic that we will discuss is Ibalon, a famous Bicolano epic. So Ibalon tells the story of 3 heroes, Baltog, Hangyong, and Bantong. These heroes fought monsters, enemies, and other dangers in order to protect the people of Ibalon. Through their bravery and strength, they helped bring peace and prosperity to their land. So this epic highlights important values such as courage, leadership, heroism, and the values of Bicolano people. Now that we have discussed some examples of Philippine epics, let us identify the elements of an epic. So the first element is the hero. The hero is the main character who shows great courage and strength. For example, Lamang in Biag ni Lamang and Aliguyon in Aliguyon are heroes who face challenges and demonstrate extraordinary abilities. The second element is the setting. The setting refers to the time and place where the story happens. The third element is the plot. The plot is the sequence of events or adventures that happen throughout the story. The next one is conflict. Conflict is the main problem or struggle faced by the hero. Fifth is a supernatural element. This may include gods, spirits, magical powers, or extraordinary events. The next one is the theme. The theme is the main message, lesson, or idea of the epic. So for example, an epic may have themes of courage, love, family, unity, or perseverance. Next one is cultural values. These are the beliefs, traditions, customs, and values shown in the story. This is especially important in Philippine epics because these stories allow us to learn about the different cultures of Filipino communities. And the last one is the epic style. Epic style refers to the use of formal, repetitive, and descriptive language. Because many epics were passed down orally, repetition and descriptive language helped storytellers remember and perform the stories. To conclude, epic poetry is an important part of pre-colonial Philippine literature. It tells stories about brave heroes, extraordinary adventures, conflicts, and supernatural events. Through Philippine epics such as Biag ni Lamang, Ibalon, Aliguyon, Darangan, and the Muragtas Chronicles of Panay, we can learn about the cultures, traditions, beliefs, and values of different Filipino communities. These stories are important because they help preserve our rich cultural heritage. They also remind us of important values such as courage, love, family, unity, leadership, and perseverance. As a student and future educator, learning about these epics helps us appreciate the richness of Philippine literature and understand how our ancestors preserve their stories and traditions through oral storytelling. And that ends my discussion about oral lore from pre-colonial epic. Thank you so much for listening and God bless.